What is happening y'all? Jay here, and in this Dragon Dogma video, we are looking at the best pawn you can have and which inclinations, specialization and skills are best suited to support your team. So if you're not using the mage as your main character, this is literally the best pawn setup for any build. First off, we are going to look at inclination and specialization, and these two are so underrated and I rarely see any videos on these, but they make such a big difference to your pawn's behavior, especially mid and late game. Will they play it smart, or will they just mindlessly attack head on? Or maybe they support you. Or what if they look out for enemy weaknesses and then attack their foe? But what inclination you choose also depends on the vocation of your main pawn. Say for example, if you choose a fighter as your main pawn, and for him you'll have to stick with straightforward. So the AI behavior of a straightforward fighter will include hunting down enemies, attract attention from challenging foes, and use their strongest skills, albeit often without good planning. But let's say if you have thief as your main pawn, but go for the same inclination you used for a fighter, this is what will happen to him. So in this case, calm is the perfect inclination, as it will stay behind the tanks and look for its weaknesses to target lock on, and the same goes for the archer. Now that brings me to the main pawn of discussion here, which I believe is the best main pawn to have by your side, and that's the mage. And for the mage, kind-hearted is the perfect choice. A mage with a kind-hearted inclination prioritizes supporting allies in need. If someone is dazed or in need of healing, you can be rest assured the pawn will offer aid. That brings me to the second most ignored aspect about the pawn. Just as you choose pawn inclinations in Dragon Dogma 2, you will also need to consider specializations. Now, while pawn inclinations serve as a basis of your companion's personality and primary behaviors in the game, pawn specializations are a brand new addition of Dragon Dogma 2. In essence, these are skills that allow your pawn to perform a variety of actions on their own. Now, to teach specialization to your main pawn, you will need to obtain and use specialization tomes. These tomes can be earned by doing side quests or just by exploring. And for changing inclination, you need this. So which specialization to use for your pawn? Well, unlike inclination, this one is based on personal preference. However, I am gonna tell you my favorite for a mage, but even then, let's go through all of them in brief. First up, Forager. This will basically display locations of all the valuable enhancement materials on the map, and this is displayed even if you have not traveled to that location. Logistician. Now this is a really cool specialization which allows your pawn to combine materials on their own and move them between your team. Woodland Woodsmith, the only easy name in the list. This basically allows you to understand Elvish language, which can be quite handy later on when you visit the Elven town. And finally, we have my favorite and the specialization that I would tag along with my kind-hearted inclination is Chirurgi. Come on! Where the pawn takes the initiative to use curatives on the horizon and other allies as needed. Say for example you have been poisoned, or say you have been put under a sleep spell. The pawn will recognize this and use the correct potion. Now, I think this is really cool and so helpful. So, with that out of the way, let's talk skills. And the reason I prefer the mage as my main pawn is cause unlike Dragon Dogma the Dark Horizon, healing is a core spell and it does not occupy any skill slot. Also, I do not think many know this, but you do not have to stand inside the bubble to get healed. You can simply run past it and that's it. The heal status will be applied to you, which will last as long as the spell is active. You don't need to stand inside the bubble. Okay, coming to the weapon skills, which in this case are spells. And I'm going to show you all the best spells you need. I think there are 7 or 8 based on situation, and you can even ignore the rest. Why ignore? Well, they are mostly useful if you're using mage as your main character and not as a pawn. First up, we have the high flagration, which is nothing but a flamethrower. And since this game has so many enemies which are weak to fire, this is a great skill to have. The only downside to this skill is that while she is busy casting this is time lost. Time lost in healing you or removing negative buffs, which could be deadly. Next up is one skill which I almost always use on my Mage Pawn, and that's High Levin. And this spell smites the enemy from above with lightning strikes, and this spell is especially useful at hitting foes who are hiding or even out of sight. And this spell has another trick up its sleeve. It somehow has this knack of hitting enemy weak points. And just for that reason, I choose this spell over High Flagration. And from fire, we move on to ice. We have the High Frigor. This spell can do multiple things. Other than doing good damage to enemies, this can also freeze enemies. It can launch smaller enemies in the air, and we are not done yet. The trail of spikes that you leave behind, they even explode on being hit. And you can use this platform to climb onto big enemies. High Palladium. For me, this is the best skill in the game, period. And I cannot stress this enough. How many times this spell has saved my ass. Basically, this spell makes you and your party invulnerable against one hit. So, be it a pesky ogre or a mighty dragon, you don't care. You won't take any damage. My next favorite spell is based on your enemy's elemental weakness. There's fire, ice, and lightning. Fire is quite useful as many enemies in this game has weakness to fire, and lightning is great as the damage you deal bounces off nearby enemies. But for me, the clear winner is Ice Affinity, and the reason is freeze. You can freeze enemies after a few consecutive strikes, making them immobile for your team to do massive damage. Now, before I tell you the best skill of any vocation, let me tell you a bonus spell which I use quite often. Now, we all know who the worst enemy in Dragon Dogma 2 is.
Ah, my old enemy. Stairs.
Yup, we have to travel far and wide and cover long distances. So this spell is really helpful. High Celerity. It basically increases your speed while running while consuming the same amount of stamina. And finally, we have one spell which is a must-have. Celestial Pain, and this is a master skill, something you need to unlock by doing a quest. Now, most of the high-end skills that you use as your main character, be it as a warrior or a fighter or a magic spearhead, uses a lot of stamina. So, if you happen to have Celestial Pain on your support mage, you will basically not run out of stamina. It is insane that this spell even exists. And I'll be releasing a video soon on my channel on how to get this spell. So that's about it. You guys loved my first Dragon Dogma video on the fighter guide, and I'll link that in the description below. And my next one is on the magic spear. So if that sounds interesting to you, a like and a sub would be simply lovely.